1, 2, 3, 4.
Screen time, screen time, screen time, screen time.
It's my screen time too.
Screen time, screen time.
Hello, and welcome to It's My Screen Time Too, the podcast where two moms review the best and worst in children's programming. From Netflix reboots and YouTube shorts to Disney classics and Pixar blockbusters. We watch, you listen. Find out what you can tolerate watching for family movie night, what to avoid altogether, and what you'll want to watch alone voluntarily. I'm Deborah.
And I'm Katie.
And I have 3 kids by the time you listen to this. Tony will be 14.
What?
And Livy and Nate are 10.
And I have 2 kids. Jay is 8 and Kenny is 5. We both like to tell a quick story at the top of the episode about how awesome or occasionally awful our kids are, because in addition to being witty and incisive pop culture consumers, we're moms too, and we just like to get that stuff out of the way. So tell me what your super old kids have been up to.
Tony is in some after-school programs at his school, and one of them, they have a STEAM lounge, science, tech, engineering, art, math, and he's been making a podcast.
Oh, bup, Tony.
Yeah, and he, in the car the other day, he asked, what's the ideal length of a podcast episode? And because I teach a class on podcasting, I said between 18 and 33 minutes, which coincides with the average American's commute.
And then you immediately felt bad for the fact that we routinely exceed that by 15 minutes.
No, I don't feel bad. I feel like ours is an ideal length for what we cover.
Thank you. I feel validated. That is so cute. And do you want to share what Tony's podcast is about?
It's about Dungeons and Dragons.
Love. I could use the advice. I could use it. Speaking of our kids getting older, I have been playing board games and card games with my kids a lot lately, as I like to do. And Kenny is 5 years old now, so we're getting to the point where like he less and less needs separate games, and we can all play together more, which is so great. So we were playing this card game called Sleeping Queens together, which I've been a fan of for Jay for years, but I felt like was maybe a little too complicated for Kenny. So we introduced him to the rules earlier this week, and he's having a lot of fun. And it's a lot of fun to play with both of them and not have to do a lot of hand holding. So it's a really, really great milestone to be getting to.
Yay, that's great.
And that's my plug for Sleeping Queens, which is very fun. All right, screen time in the news. Guys, this is so funny because after our last episode, I floated the idea of tabling any more discussion of whether and how to watch scary movies with our kids, because it felt like every article we read seemed to rehash the same territory. But then I randomly found this great MovieWeb article that goes more into the history of kids and horror, and you just know I'm a sucker for historical perspective, so we had to talk about it. So today we're talking about an October 16th MovieWeb article titled "The 90s Weren't Afraid to Scare Kids: The Rise and Fall of Horror for Younger Audiences" by Taylor Klink. The article talks about how the 90s and the 2000s, which helpfully coincides to the time that we were kids, were actually a great time for kids and horror. It traces a timeline of 90s and 2000s kids horror, starting with the 1990 adaptation of Roald Dahl's The Witches, which I believe starred Angelica Houston. Am I correct on that?
I think you're right.
Okay. About how it was a movie that was clearly made for kids, but it wasn't afraid to be honestly scary, which I remember seeing that movie as a kid. Do you remember seeing that movie as a kid? It was pretty scary. All right. And then it moves on. It says The Witches was a modest success, at least later as a cult movie. So then you got things like Hocus Pocus, which I would argue is not really all that scary, and The Nightmare Before Christmas, which I would argue is a horrible movie, but I realize I'm alone in that one. Then the article goes on to talk about the blockbuster book series Goosebumps by R.L. Stine, which it turns out is the second best-selling series of all time behind Harry Potter, which is kind of incredible. Did you read Goosebumps books as a kid?
I read Christopher Pike books
Mm-hmm.
because I'm a little older than Goosebumps were like a little babyish
Yeah.
for me.
Christopher Pike had more of the teenagery vibe.
Mm-hmm.
The article goes on to talk about Scooby-Doo taking a turn for the darker side with the popular Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, which was released in 1998. And then goes on to talk about a cartoon that I had never heard of before, Courage the Cowardly Dog, which was apparently a very big hit for the Cartoon Network in 1999. So those were kind of the touchstones of the rise of horror made specifically for kids in the 90s. And then the article goes on to say that there was a big shift in the 2000s where parents were suddenly a lot more concerned with what their kids were watching. Sadly, the article doesn't speculate at all as to why that would be. My first thought was 9/11 anxiety, possibly post-Columbine fears about kids being exposed to media,
Mm-hmm.
and that all snowballed into our current climate of not allowing our kids to be exposed to anything.
Mm-hmm.
Then the article does go on to say that without horror TV and movies and books being made and specifically marketed to kids anymore, that kids are still getting horror content. They're just getting it from content that's actually made for teenagers or even adults. They mention the video game Five Nights at Freddy's, the show Stranger Things, which just thinking about my kids at their age watching Stranger Things fills me with so much anxiety.
Yeah.
And even mentions the movie Megan, saying that all of this exposure to content, scary content for grown-ups, might actually still be an okay on-ramp for kids as long as they have the correct adult supervision. That was kind of where the article ended, which I found to be a bit dissatisfying because I don't think I will ever be showing my kids Megan, mostly because it feels too scary for me.
Right.
But that was a big takeaway for me, is that we need to start exposing kids to more horror TV and movies, or they're going to get it through video games, which, as you know, is a medium that I feel so out of control about.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. What did you think about this article?
I'm not sure I agree with the sentence that says today kids' horror is nearly non-existent in pop culture. I think that's not true. I think maybe it's in different mediums than it used to be. But like, if you've ever been to a Scholastic book fair in the last 5 to 10 years, like there are scary books and there is spooky content, maybe not in the same vein as like, ooh, this left out Tales from the Crypt. Remember that old HBO chestnut? I don't know. It had some good points. It made me wonder a little bit how much of the 90s, if we can call it a boom in kids horror, was a response to like satanic panic in the 80s, because it was like not a real thing, but parents were really worried about the influence of like Satanism on their kids.
Right.
I don't know. I guess if I had kids who were very interested in watching horror, I would use some of these suggestions to like watch it with them and kind of make it not verboten. Because I think anytime you like put something completely off limits, that makes it really tantalizing. But I don't know. It was interesting. It brought me back to some of my favorite properties when I was, a teenager in the 90s.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up. I feel like in addition to the missed opportunity to talk about maybe why we moved away from horror content for kids in the 2000s, I feel like there was also a strong implication that any horror or scary thing that's being made for kids now is significantly watered down. I want to see like a longitudinal study of Goosebumps books because I believe R.L. Stine is still writing them. Like, I think they're still coming out fairly steadily. I would like to see if, like, the objective horror content in these books has been going down and they're wimpier than they used to be. Because I feel like that was the implication of this article without giving any evidence to back it up.
Yeah. Is he really writing them? Or I assumed it was like, you know how Anne M. Martin's name is on all the Babysitter Club books, but she didn't write all them, or maybe I'm confusing that with
Yeah.
Sweet Valley High,
Yeah, no,
Francine
you're right. You're
Pascal.
right. I feel like I listened to an interview with him on the Armchair Expert podcast within the past couple of years. And he was still writing, like churning out books regularly. Can I say that they are definitely all for the Goosebumps franchise? No, I cannot. But I definitely know that he was still active, at least at that point
Wow.
2 years ago. Yeah.
So
I
prolific.
know, right?
He's like the Joyce Carol Oates of kids horror. That's awesome.
You can put that on a t-shirt. Oh, that's great. Before we move on to our main event, do we have any follow-up from last week's episode? Were you able to watch the Eddie Murphy Haunted Mansion?
I still have not, but we're recording this before Halloween, so maybe there's still time.
Yes, we still do have time.
Let's move on to our movie that we're reviewing. Spy Kids Armageddon is a PG movie that was released on September 22nd, 2023 by Netflix. It was directed by Robert Rodriguez, who came to fame directing Desperado and From Dusk Till Dawn in the 90s. From Dusk Till Dawn was a movie that I very much watched and pretended to like, even though I actually hated it.
Oh, okay.
And Rodriguez directed all 4 previous Spy Kids movies, which came out in 2001, 2002, 2003, and 2011. Wikipedia is very careful to emphasize Rodriguez's involvement in every level of this movie, writing that it was, quote, co-produced, shot, edited, co-composed, and directed by Robert Rodriguez, let's bold this, who co-wrote it with his son, Racer Max, end quote. Robert and Racer aren't the only family members involved. According to a Yahoo Entertainment article by Kevin Palawi, it's a family affair. Robert Rodriguez co-wrote Armageddon with his son Racer Max. His son Rebel composed the score, and his ex-wife and the kid's mother, Elizabeth Avalon, produced. Nepo babies, I am so happy for you.
Oh, if you could only see Deborah's face right now.
Spy Kids Armageddon is the 5th installment in the film series, and it's the first to be distributed by Netflix. Rodriguez has indicated that more films are in the planning phase. Netflix previously released a 2018 animated series based on the movies titled Spy Kids Mission Critical, and the movie was produced by Skydance Media, Spyglass Media Group, and Troublemaker Studios, which is Rodriguez's production company. The length is in our magic window of 1 hour, 37 minutes, pretty ideal for a family film. And here's the summary according to IMDb. The children of the world's greatest secret agents unwittingly help a powerful game developer unleash a computer virus that gives him control of all technology, leading them to become spies themselves to save their parents and the world. Why did we pick it? We welcome the chance to cover a long-running franchise that has been in our blind spot all this time we've been podcasting.
Yeah, exactly. Which brings us to our general thoughts on the movie. Have you ever watched a Spy Kids movie before?
So we stay at a lake resort every summer with my whole family, my parents, my brother, his family. And they have this like antique DVD collection in the office game room. And so Spy Kids 3 has been in there ever since we've been going to this resort. And my kids like to watch that one. This past summer, however, it was too scratched and it didn't play. So thanks for the memories, Spy Kids 3 DVD. But the reason my kids liked it was because the CGI was so laughably bad. They watched it because they would like to poke fun at the, quote, special effects that were very special.
That's so sad. And really speaks to just how far we've come since 2011, right? That's when the last one was?
That one was really old.
Okay.
I think 2003. So
well, you've got one up on me because I had never seen a Spy Kids movie before. I have, however, always found the franchise to be fascinating. Because whether or not he really was part of the vanguard in this mini movement, I think of Robert Rodriguez as one of the first in Hollywood to go from making movies very explicitly for adults to saying, hey, I want to be a part of something that my kids can watch. So now we see it all the time with actors of a certain age, but at the time that the first Spy Kids movie came out in 2001, I remember there being discussions and even headlines like Robert Rodriguez is making a kids movie, as if that were a major step down for his career. I'm wondering if you have any feelings about whether or not this elevates Spy Kids pedigree at all. Like, do we expect more from a kids movie because it's made by a more prestige director?
I guess after was it Pinocchio that Guillermo del Toro directed? I'm not certain that I think it's the best for a director who specializes in gore and horror to direct a kids movie, but this is not that. This is very family friendly. Rodriguez scraped all the Tarantino resin off of his equipment and started anew.
That's true. I had forgotten that he did the Grindhouse movies, like the one with the girl with the machine gun leg. Like that was him, right?
Yeah, I think so.
So a real departure. In doing research for this episode, I read on Wikipedia that the fourth Spy Kids movie, which was called Spy Kids All the Time in the World and was released in 2011. Okay, so that's the 2011 one. They used something called aromascope, which allowed audiences to smell odors and aromas from the film through scratch and sniff cards. I don't know what your thoughts are, but this would seem to indicate a franchise that is out of ideas. What do you think motivated them to bring it back 10 years later?
Or do you think they got like approved for a budget and they were like over? Like they had more money to spend? You know how like at the end of the year, fiscally, if you work for some kind of like nonprofit, you've like gotta spend that money or you'll never get that money again. That's what it sounds like to me.
I love that idea. Well, we have this money, the movie's done, but we may as well make these scratch and sniff cards. So you were optimistic that this franchise might have some more gas in it?
I mean, I think all the movies are kind of the same story, just like different iterations of the same basic arc. So I could see this going on a long time, as long as Rebel and Racer keep churning out the screenplays or the scores or whatever they say that they do.
Maybe we do have to start recording our podcast recording sessions for YouTube, because sometimes your faces they just say more than your words. Listeners, you've probably already seen Spy Kids movies, but this fifth movie is like a soft reboot, right? Because the first four movies, it was my understanding, all focus on the same family.
Right.
The same primary two kids. And this is a whole new family. We don't see any of the characters from previous films. So that, to me, you're right, speaks to being able to continue it kind of indefinitely. Like, if you can just keep introducing new spy families when your cute spy kids age out of the cute kid age, why stop, right?
Oh my gosh, and they were so cute. We'll get to it, but that little girl.
Oh, I know. All the earnestness in the world, just so sweet. There's also a meta level to this movie for us, because part of the plot involves the kids struggling with the limits their parents put on their screen time. Do you think that this familiar complaint will mean the movie will resonate more with today's young viewers?
I think that would be a compelling reason to like this. I mean, it's very familiar. Like anyone who's growing up in this time period goes through, or anyone who's parenting also is going through that. Like, is tech good? Is tech bad? How much is too much?
So it's a compelling hook.
Totally. And super relatable to, I feel like, everybody involved.
Yeah, kids and parents alike. All right, so that leads me to the important question. Did you like it?
I liked it. I thought it was fun. I mean, It was a very predictable plot, but that's not a bad thing necessarily when you're watching a family film. I
Hmm.
was entertained. It was a great length. How did you feel about it?
My two watchwords that I wrote down for this movie are comfortable and welcoming.
Yeah.
It was like a warm blanket of a movie because you had the familiar parenting elements, like common things that parents have experienced before to like make you relate to the parents. You have the familiar elements of a spy story, like the bones of a classic spy story are there. And you have
Mm-hmm.
the familiar lesson orientation of a classic children's movie. So nothing felt unfamiliar and nothing felt shocking, but at least in this case, that's not a bad thing. Like it all felt very comfortable.
Yeah, like a Hallmark holiday film, sort of.
I mean, I would argue that's giving it too little credit because when
Okay.
you're trying to appeal to parents and kids, I think there's a
Mm-hmm.
higher degree of difficulty there. Not that I don't love
Mm-hmm.
Hallmark Christmas movies. You know, they have a special place in my heart. All right, so let's talk about that cast and characters. Was there anyone you particularly loved or hated?
The little girl, Patty. So Patty and Tony are they're twins, right?
I got the feeling like Tony may have been the older brother.
He was a little bit taller, but there was like a line in there when they said when we were four. I don't know. Libby
Okay.
and I were trying to speculate on if because we wanted them to be twins.
Okay, okay.
I thought the kids were the little girl really. I found her very endearing, but I
Hmm.
liked the parents too, and even the villain was a kind of a funny guy.
Yeah, I thought the kids were super adorable and struck the right note of like, I'm a kid in a movie, so it always looks a little stagey and like still being believable, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I liked Gina Rodriguez and Zachary Levi as the parents. I think they're both charming actors. I sometimes struggle to get over a little bit of hesitancy about Zachary Levi ever since I learned that he's like a very aggressive evangelical to his coworkers on set, which just seems like not cool. Like, don't bring that here. Let us have a collegial working relationship. But I don't know.
Did you watch Chuck? That was the series he was in.
I did, yeah, for the first couple years. I don't know how long it went, but I didn't finish it.
Okay.
How about you?
I never watched Chuck. I don't even know what I mean, this guy is like a real familiar dad bro kind of stock character. I thought he was good and funny, and I don't know. I mean, I don't want to be proselytized too, but I feel like maybe evangelical Christianity, like that overtness of it, is like more welcome than like the disingenuous Scientology.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and you know, it can also translate to just being like very nice, which seems like it would be a positive, especially on a set with young people.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't have to work with him, so it doesn't bother me, I guess.
What did you think of Gina Rodriguez? I was reminded of her voice work in Carmen Sandiego, which we reviewed a long time ago.
Oh, yeah. I thought she was good. She seemed too young to be a mom.
Right? Right? Yes. It is funny to see these characters and be like, oh, they're the parents' age now. Okay.
Right.
um,
Especially because the kids are like the age of my kids, and I look very haggard compared to her.
for the record, this is going to be like, I'm just going to keep mentioning how we need to start filming our podcast. Deborah does not look haggard, guys. She looks great.
Oh, bop, Katie.
All right, our thoughts on the look of the movie. What did you think? I know you said that the Spy Kids 3 CGI and effects are really dated. Were you immediately worried about how this would age even as you were watching it?
I mean, there was a line in it where the villain says something like, the late 20th century was the height of video game technology. And I think that was like an inside joke about how bad the effects were in the original movies.
Oh, okay.
Have you ever read the Ricky Ricotta books? They're like, it's a Dave Pilkey series. I thought that the video game villains looked very much like the books, like the villains in those books. I
Okay.
thought they were fine. And I thought, like, I love spy tech, even if it's cheesy. And like the first scene really grabbed me where the kids are like walking on the ceiling, and all they did was just like spin the film around in that editing bay. But that was fun.
Yeah, I think the CGI villain characters will end up looking bad soon enough.
Mm-hmm.
But they looked
Yeah.
fine for like a TV movie, which is what I consider this to be budget wise.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe their reference to the early 2000s video game technology was like a hedge. So, like, people who watch this later will be like, oh, maybe it was supposed to look a little janky.
And there was a lot of scenes where there were like big square bricks, which I thought was was that a nod to Minecraft?
You know, I'm the wrong person to be asking this. Maybe.
Well, I guess I'm asking your kids. The video game scenes were very blocky, like Minecrafty, I thought.
There was a great fight sequence between the parents and the villain where, like, the ground would come up to meet them. So it was like you would
Mhm.
step into air and you wouldn't know if something would come, but something would just pop up to be under their feet. I thought that was like a nice bit of work. That was pretty fun to
Mhm.
watch.
Yeah.
All right, what about the music composed by Rebel Rodriguez?
It was fine. Like the only time I really noticed it was the opening sequence when it seemed like kind of a riff off like Mission Impossible
Mm-hmm.
and also Goldfinger, like a
Mm-hmm.
mashup of those two themes.
Yeah, very consciously spy movie tone setting.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What about the writing?
Okay, I thought that the dialogue was a little thin, but that the actors really made the most of it. But then I was also like, maybe it's because it's written more for kids' comprehension. I don't know. What did you think about the writing?
Again, I just keep going back to the fact that this movie felt so comfortable from a kid's content
Mhm.
perspective. The plot was easy to follow, but not dull. I liked the silliness of the whole conflict hinging on the fact that in order to get things done in their daily lives, grown-ups had to play video games, and it was like grinding the world to a halt. Like, that to me was such a funny little bit for everything to hinge on.
Mhm.
Because I
Mhm.
would not be able to take money out of the ATM if I had to like do a boss fight beforehand.
That was super relatable. I also liked, I guess the twist of it was that the little girl Patty was kind of advocating for more of a diplomacy approach,
Hmm.
more of a carrot than stick. Because her parents, like, I liked the part where the parents were like, yeah, we went to the headquarters and we just busted that guy's face in, basically. And she was like, well, why didn't you try to distract him with the emoji machine?
Oh my
and
gosh.
talk to him.
We need to talk about the emoji machine because, Deborah, I know you like spy tech, but I like it to have like some grounding in reality. There is like this little ball that she presses a button on and throws, and it can spontaneously make the people around the ball experience a specific emotion.
Mm-hmm.
It was real bad. I would not, that is something I would cut. Real lazy.
Okay.
I guess just an excuse to like have cute emojis appear on screen, and that's something that kids like.
Yeah, we've seen animation done a lot better than that. Like Mitchell's versus the Machine, which I know is like an all animated movie, but
Yeah, it's
yeah.
not even like the physical presentation of it that I objected to as much as its
Mhm.
mere presence.
Just the
Like,
concept.
yeah.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the structure and length. You said you liked the hour and a half runtime. How did you think about the way it was put together?
I liked it very like I said earlier, very predictable structure in a good way. You know where it's going. So it didn't feel very innovative, but not every movie needs to be innovative.
Anything else before we move on to our evergreens?
No, let's talk about what adult movie or show does this compare to?
Well, I think you were right to mention Chuck because that whole element of being thrust into the spy world without knowing anything about it, and then like a big piece of the movie being about you learning to be good at it, and then by the end you're like really successful and you bring something unique to the table. I think that
Mm-hmm.
was the whole arc of Chuck, but then it also made me think of The Americans.
Oh, yeah.
And as I bring up these shows, I'm realizing that I do have a habit of just not following through with like the final few seasons of television shows because I also never finished The Americans. But I know at some point there was some involvement of the children in the spy biz and like teaching the children how to navigate in that world. So that's what rang a bell to me. How about you?
We never finished The Americans either. One of the great regrets of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I can still do it. Okay, I was just on an airplane and I didn't know about this movie with Julia Louis-Dreyfus called You Hurt My Feelings.
Yeah, with Tobias Menzies, maybe? Am I thinking
Yeah.
correctly? Okay.
Yeah, so I watched that on the plane and that Spy Kids Armageddon reminded me of that movie because the themes are very much like what do we tell honestly the people that we're closest to and
Mm-hmm.
like how can we be honest with them? So that kind of made me think of like the dynamic of the parents revealing to the kids that they're actually spies, the kids revealing to the parents that they've been sneaking video games this whole time.
Uh-huh.
Uh, because in You Hurt My Feelings, it's all about like, what do you tell the person you love the most if you don't like something like this book, a book they've written,
Uh-huh.
or their whether or not they're good at their job. Okay, were you able to cast the gritty HBO reboot?
So I have been listening to and really enjoying the book MCU: The Reign of Marvel Studios by Joanna Robinson, Dave Gonzalez, and Gavin Edwards. And it's a really fun kind of chronicling of how we came to be where we are with Marvel. And it's got me thinking about Brie Larson. Do you know that actress? So
Yes.
she plays Captain Marvel in the MCU, but
Yeah. Okay.
she won an Oscar for the adaptation of the book Room. Did you read that book about like the abducted woman who then had
Yes.
her captor's
Well,
baby
I
and
read the book.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. Yes. So I've been thinking about her and how good she was in Room and how much I loved her interaction with her son in that movie. And I would
Mm-hmm.
just love to see her like gritty take on how much of the spy biz to share with your kids and how to bring them into the fold. I think
Mm-hmm.
that would be a fun one for her. That's all I got. Were you able to cast?
Yes, I would have spy moms played by Michelle Rodriguez from the Fast and Furious franchise and
Okay, I
Lost,
like it already.
and Rebecca Henderson. She is well, she had like a little bit part in You Hurt My Feelings, and then she's in Single Drunk Female on Hulu. She plays like the AA sponsor.
Okay.
So they would be spy moms, and they would have to build a city using Minecraft rules, and their kids would be like repositories of Minecraft lore, like ours are, from watching YouTube videos. And the moms would be like, I thought YouTube was terrible. And the kids would be like, no, it's useful. So,
I want to see the scenes where they're just sitting on the couch and the moms are trying to casually pepper their kids with questions about Minecraft, but then they're really using it for their spy work. I like it. I think we can add Brie Larson to the team and just smush them all
hmm
together.
I like that idea. Was it better when we were kids?
I'm trying to think about our spy related content for kids, and I'm kind of coming up blank.
When was Mr. and Mrs. Smith out? Remember that?
We were already in our
That's
20s.
okay.
Yeah.
I mean, Inspector Gadget?
That's true. We did have Inspector Gadget.
Was it Dragnet? Remember the old Nickelodeon play on?
Yeah, what was that called? No, it's not coming to me.
Okay, these are all coming to me right now. I didn't think about them beforehand. Would you ever watch this alone voluntarily?
No, absolutely no need. Although I was thrilled to bits to watch it with my kids. How about you?
Same. I think it's a great family movie night pick.
Moving on to 10 seconds on whether this is good for our kids. Did you watch it with the whole fam?
Just with Libby. I think Libby and Nate are a better age for it. Tony's a little beyond Spy Kids.
So even though the older child was called Tony, you resisted the temptation to make him watch it?
Well, we're always happy to see a character named Tony.
I thought it was a really great watch for me with the age my kids are, especially with as enthusiastic as they are about video games and as generally blah as I am about video games. I couldn't have asked for a better pick.
Ratings? 1 to 5 stars?
I gotta give it a 5. It was just so darn pleasant. It was really pleasant, Deborah.
Wow. I would give it a 4. I'm gobsmacked by your rating.
I like to keep you on your toes.
I don't even have to ask. See it or skip it.
See it. Definitely see it, particularly if you have kids under 10.
Yeah, definitely see it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of It's My Screen Time Too. If you enjoyed our show today, please share it with someone you think might enjoy it. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast platform of choice. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and occasionally Twitter at MyScreenTime2, or send an email to myscreentime2@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your YouTube suggestions, article recommendations, or general comments about the show. Our website is myscreentime2.com, where you can subscribe to our newsletter. Our theme music was composed and performed by Deborah and her adorable children, and our podcast is produced by me, Katie. You can hear more from us on our other podcast, Spock Talk, where we discuss the life and legacy of Dr. Benjamin Spock. Tune in next time for more real talk about the movies and TV we watch with our kids because we have to, and sometimes because we like to. Bye!
Screen time! Screen time! Screen time!